Greetings. This is Caroline Staten with Transition US. Thank you for joining our online event today. Our principal aim in offering these is to provide practical support to the leaders of transition initiatives, those who are considering starting an initiative in their community, and to all of the leaders everywhere that are working on resilience building within their towns, their cities, their regions. So thank you for joining us. And we would like to continue to offer these teleseminars at no cost, but really do sincerely ask that you consider the value of these and make a donation to transitionus.org so that we can continue to offer these events. Even if it's a very small donation, like a cup of coffee size, we would really, really appreciate that. So we have a link to our donation page on transitionus.org. Again, thanks so much for those of you who are able to do that. And about our wonderful guest presenter today, who's become quite an expert in time banking, and that's Marie Goodwin. And Marie started off as an archaeologist by training and found herself much more interested in the modern stories of our culture than any ancient ones being thought up by academics. In addition to stories, she's interested in activism and transition. And she's on a great team of community builders in Transition Town Media, and we'll hear more about this. And with their support, founded the Media Free Store and Timebank Media. And Marie is also very passionate about the issues related to local food, herbal medicine, traditional cultures, news story education, and local economic resilience. And for her day job, she works with the author and philosopher Charles Eisenstein. And one other point I just want to make before turning it over to you, Marie, is that for those of you that are interested in finding out more about what transition towns are, it's a vibrant grassroots movement in 44 countries around the world, and it's really focusing on building community, engaging community, and activating community to solve the pressing issues of these times. And that's exactly what Marie is doing. So thank you for joining us today, Marie, and over to you.
Thank you, Carolyn, for that introduction, and thanks for having me on to present what we're doing here in media and what we think is working for us here. So a little bit about our Transition Town effort. We started in 2009, and we were the first transition town in the state of Pennsylvania. And it started very, very small, like most transition towns do. And over the last 6 years, it has grown into a very large community endeavor indeed. We have 40 or 50 people who regularly come to steering committee meetings. We have large events, sometimes as many as 10 or 15 a month. We are working on many different facets of resilience in our community. We have reskilling groups. We have an energy group that's working on things in our community. We have people on our borough council who are active in transition. And we are active in our town planning. And we've become really a part of the community in a really wonderful way. And it is through initiatives and projects, these big visible projects like the Timebank and our new Free Store, that people are beginning to participate in a much larger part of the community than just the inner circle of people who are on steering. So Timebanking is one way to make that happen. I really oriented this presentation towards people who are transition people, who are either working in transition or thinking about transition, and who don't know that much about time banking. If there are time banking people on who know, what time banking is about and are participating in time banking right now, the first part of this presentation might be a little boring for you, so maybe go wiki, transition towns and read up on that. But I wanted to ask first, can you use your keypad and answer the question, who is familiar with time banking, who is participating in time banking? Press 1 for yes and 2 for no. And then Carolyn can tell me the results of those polls when that happens.
Yeah, they're coming in. So again, if you can access your keypad and you're familiar with time banking, you'll be pressing 1, or if you're using time banking, and 2 if not. Is that correct, Marie?
Yes.
So we're getting the dials moving. It looks to be about 45% and are familiar with it and using it. 31% of those who responded are not familiar.
Okay. So for those who are familiar with time banking, like I said, the first part of it, maybe the first 10 or 15 minutes might be a little reiterative for you, but just hang on with me and then we'll explore some deeper issues in a little while. I also wanted to point out that if you do have access to look at the PDF that Carolyn sent you of the presentation, there are some visuals there which that might help break up the presentation. And also questions. A number of you submitted questions before the teleseminar started, and I'm going to try and answer as many of those in the presentation as I can. Some of the questions you presented are actually answered in the FAQ document that I sent you, the PDF. So if you could read over that, and that may help answer some of the questions if I don't answer them directly in the presentation. And at the end, I do want to do a Q&A, and hopefully a long Q&A, and I can answer some of the rest of the questions then. All right, so what is time banking? Well, time banking at its most basic level is a community of people who come together to support one another through acts of service. Time banking itself is a system that connects those acts of service with people who need them, and it creates a way for you to ask for help when you need it or to give help when it is needed. And modern day and age, we do this through a computer system. There are a number of programs out there that you can buy or participate in on the internet, and a lot of those are in. You can look that up in the frequently asked questions part, the PDF I gave you, if you're interested. The program basically makes visible the needs that are present in your community and also the gifts that people have to offer in the community. And often because our communities, we are so isolated from each other, sitting in our silos of houses, and needing things or having things that we can do for other people, but we just can't see where our gifts might be used or where somebody might be able to help us with a need. And so all that time banking does is make that visible. Time banking also really acknowledges the fact that we do this anyway. There's a whole undercurrent of our economy of people doing things for neighbors and friends without being paid for it, without being recognized for it in a financial way. And that is a big part of our economic system. The reality is that it is an unseen part of our economic system, but it is still part of our economic system already. We're doing this for each other anyway. So time banking acknowledges that and makes it visible and makes it so that you can count it and look at it and see these transactions going on in your community. And the other thing that time banking is that's really important is a way to reward volunteerism and pro bono work. A lot of us working in transition, and time banking too, but a lot of us working in transition put in a lot of hours on a volunteer basis to build resilience in our communities. And when that work is not acknowledged or appreciated, or there's no way that you can then in turn get your needs met, sometimes that can lead to frustration and burnout. And so what time banking does is provide a way to acknowledge the work that people are doing in the community. And it's really a very beautiful way. We'll discuss more of that later. So how does time banking work? Well, the basic premise of the basic tenet of time banking is that 1 hour of work equals another hour of work. And there is no variation in that. So if you provide an hour of babysitting service, that is equal to an hour of somebody who does pro bono law work. Now at first, a lot of people have questions around this. And at first people think, well, wait a minute, I went to law school and I have this skill and I need to be paid more. But time banking recognizes that all value placed on work is really value that is assigned to the work by the community. And what I mean by that is that if you were to go to Bhutan, for instance, a non-litigious society, the value of a lawyer's work would be nothing because there's no need for a lawyer there. So the community in Bhutan has decided that that's valueless work, but the work of participating and caring for elders is much more valuable. So because labor and the value of labor is dependent on the culture, time banking has decided to just erase all of those barriers and all of that baggage around work and say 1 hour equals 1 hour because every person is worth the same. Every person in their inherent value is a person with gifts and a person who is able to contribute to community, and we're going to celebrate that equally. Another working part of a time bank is that individuals join a time bank, but also businesses and nonprofits can join a time bank as well and participate in the time bank and in the exchange in really creative ways. And businesses and nonprofits being a big part of your time bank actually really makes it thrive and succeed. So that's another thing about time banking. So when you volunteer, you record your hours in this time banking software, and the time dollars are either added or subtracted to your account automatically. So there really isn't any accounting that has to be done by any one person other than you and the person who you participated in the transaction with. So for instance, in a couple of years ago, my husband had back surgery, and it was right at the time when our firewood was delivered. We burn wood for heat in the winter only, and we had 8 cords of wood to be stacked. And my husband had back surgery, and I was looking at this enormous pile of firewood, and I knew that I could not stack this myself before the first snow started. So I sent out a message on my time bank and said, I need help. And 14 people showed up, some of whom I knew, some I didn't, and they stacked my wood in 3 hours. And so what I did then is I gave them time dollars and I bought them pizza and beer, and we celebrated and had a meal and built community around the event. And then after the event was over, I went into my program and I gave each of them 3 time dollars through the system in one exchange. And the program took care of that all. It was automatically given to their program, to their account, and deducted from mine. So that's how that works. The communication about the event happened within the time banking software and also happened on Facebook. We have a very active Facebook page and use social media to the fullest extent possible. We have a group that surrounds it. We have a Facebook page. We have email trees. And we disseminate information in as many ways as possible to try and hit all of the different people who might be interested. Some people use Facebook, some people don't. Some people use email, some people don't. So we really try to hit as many different modes of communication when we're communicating somebody's need or offer. Another thing about the system, and this is a question people ask all the time, there is no way to cheat within the system. People are convinced there must be a way to go in and game the system and figure out a way to add hours to your account that you didn't actually do. But once you become familiar with the software program, there really isn't a way because there's a checks and balances system. Everybody's transaction is visible to the coordinators, and there really isn't a way to cheat. And the time bank organization, the people who run the time bank have an account of their own, and the currency is created by the Timebank giving out time dollars for volunteerism and for work that's being done in the Timebank. We give people 3 time dollars just for joining because we feel like they've done probably a lot of work surrounding like the signing up process, orientation process, the investigating Timebank, and all of that work is work that is being done to help our community. So we give them 3 time dollars just for joining so they can immediately begin giving and receiving in the Timebank. And that currency creation is how it gets started. And so with those time dollars, you then can participate in the Timebank and request services from people and make offers to other people. People do all kinds of things for each other. When people join the Timebank, sometimes the first thing they say to me is I have nothing to offer. I have no skills. All I do is work and watch TV. And it doesn't take very long to break apart that assumption because people can do all kinds of things. You can provide transportation for people. You can cook for people, cook meals for people if you're cooking for yourself. You can deliver meals to people who are homebound. You can provide companionship for people. You can go on walks with people. You can do errands for people. There's all kinds of things that we do for each other. The Phoenixville Timebank, one of my favorite stories, the Phoenixville Timebank had a woman who offered, and she was very popular, she offered to eat people's leftovers. And she would come to your house and go through your refrigerator and make a meal out of all of your leftovers and then sit down and eat a meal with you and get to know you. And she was one of the most popular people in the Timebank at the time. So there are a number of things that people can do, and it's really limited by your own creativity. And sometimes it's easier just to say, okay, well, I'm not going to make an offer right now, but I'm going to go in and see what people need. And in that process of looking at people's needs, sometimes you discover your own gifts. Until you're asked to do something, sometimes you don't know that you can do it. So Timebanking is a really good way to find out what you actually have to offer, and you begin to see yourself as a productive and gift-filled partner in your community rather than just somebody who goes to work, eats meals, watches television, and goes to sleep. I mentioned that community partners also participated in the Timebanking. Those are the organizations that participate as organizations. There are many kinds of community partners. So there's nonprofits like, say, Our Transition Town is a nonprofit, but there are all kinds of organizations that participate, like arts organizations, faith-based groups, so churches. Sometimes churches have like their own sort of segment of a Timebank where they exchange for each other and do work for each other. Local farms can participate in local food services. Many local businesses can participate, community centers and community activism, social services, all types of social services can participate. Criminal justice system, there are active youth courts and services for ex-convicts in various cities all over the United States working through Timebanking and doing creative work in Timebanking. Public and private institutions also, and artists who can do work and contribute their art for time dollars instead of for monetary gain. So those are some of the ones that we know of and some of the ones that are used in our Timebank. There are creative ways for almost any business or nonprofit or government agency to participate. So Timebanking at its basic level is pretty subversive. It's subversive because of this like hour-to-hour exchange. And this, I say that all the time and people get really uncomfortable, like, oh, it's subversive. And it is subversive in a way. But it also is, it's just this really wonderful device to sort of level the playing field between individuals. Everyone is included, even people who are economically and socially marginalized. And to me, transition really at its basic level, we need everybody's gifts in our community to make this transition possible. And transition initiatives are struggling to find ways to include everybody. That's why these social justice, these are articles that are coming out talking about social justice. Pamela Boyce-Sims has been talking about it a great deal and is leading teleseminars on it. There's a lot of writing online about including social justice and transition initiatives, and this is becoming something we're really talking about a lot. And time banking at its core is built on this idea of social justice. And so I find that to be one of the most exciting areas of time banking and its relationship to transition. The other thing that time banking really does is it gathers people, dissimilar people, around a common cause. And the common cause can be an idea, but it's usually a project. So like my wood stacking, it gathers people around a common activity, and these people may or may not know each other or may or may not know me, but in the process it gathers people around this common goal and this common thing to do. And what I find to be the most, because I work in gift economics and I'm very interested in alternative economics, I find it really important that time banking removes from the money economy things that really don't belong in the money economy, things that traditionally were gifts, things that we would do for each other as neighbors and friends. And for our community, for cleaning up our community, watershed work, helping local businesses, participating in local events. These are things that 50 or 100 years ago were not monetized at all, but have become monetized and are sort of decentralized, very insular communities. And to really rebuild community, we need to, again, begin engaging at that level of gift. So time banking doesn't do some things, and people ask this all the time. You can't buy things with time dollars. So unless there is a way to, because of the hour-for-hour stricture, you can't really assign, say, a television set an hour-for-hour exchange. And that also would be considered sort of barter or taxable. And we'll get into this later, but time dollars is the only taxable, non-taxable alternative currency. So you can't really purchase things, but you can get creative. So in our town, our local theater, Hedgerow Theater, is a community partner, and they offer shows for time dollars. And the way they can do that is because a performance is a 2-hour performance, and so it's hour for hour. People pay 2 time dollars to go and see a show, which is really a pretty good deal because the tickets are $40, $50, $60 each. So, and what that in turn does is allow Hedgerow to have people in the community come and do services for them, like sit the desk and answer the phone, do cleaning up of the theater after a performance, hand out things at a performance and do sort of dormant activities, set up for their snack time in between the performance during intermission. So Hedgerow gets a lot out of that. And so they can sell their unused seats for time dollars, and in that way they really help make themselves a more flexible and resilient nonprofit. Another thing that time banks don't really do well is work over long distances. Time banks are really local at their essence, and we don't limit the distance in time bank media that people can be from us, but it really is up to the individual. Do they want to drive 30 miles to exchange? Probably not. So most of the people in our time bank are probably within a 5 or 10 mile radius of our town, and we find that that really works best, is that they're pretty local. Another thing that time banks don't do is allow for anonymity in a transaction. So money is pretty anonymous. You can give somebody money for something, a cashier, pay for something and walk away, and there is no relationship that's built between you and the person who created the item when you buy something at Target. But that doesn't happen in time banking. You can't really be anonymous. If you're going to earn time dollars or spend time dollars, you have to actually spend time with people. So it's not an anonymous transaction. And my favorite is that people ask me all the time whether this makes me a socialist. And I don't think that time banking makes somebody a socialist. That's kind of a joke, but people ask that all the time, that that this is too subversive, that it means that I am something other than a complete supporter of our economic system, and you have to be ready when you're talking about time banking to counter that. By just saying, no, it doesn't make me a socialist, I'm just recognizing this work is already being done in our community. So time banking has 5 core values. They are that we all have gifts to give, every single one of us, even children. That community means that we rely on each other, and that's okay, that it's all right to be in relationship of need between people in your community. That there is a great deal of work in our lives that is beyond any price. So somebody caring deeply for your children and babysitting your children when you have need, there's really not a price you can pay for that. Somebody showing love to your children, or to an elder, or to tutoring somebody or yourself in a language, that there's an essence to that kind of give and take that really is beyond price. Work is more fun when it's a two-way street. So in charities where people are giving their services to, say, somebody who is in need, that when you're just providing for somebody over and over and over again, and they're dependent on you over and over and over again, it builds an inequality in the relationship that foundationally is not as much fun, really, as if the giving and receiving relationship are a two-way street. So in time banking, it acknowledges that everybody has something to give, and that there's no one person being given to, and there's no one person doing the giving, that everyone is giving and everyone is receiving. And finally, the 5th core principle is that every human being matters. But that goes back to we all have gifts to give, the first one. But every human being matters, and there's a place at the table for everybody. So time banking is better than other alternative currencies in my mind. I dabble in other alternative currencies as well, and we are interested actually in media starting a currency, like a media money it would be called. But it is a project that is really long and involved, like the design of currency, getting banks to support you, having all the businesses participate and accept the bills. All of that requires an incredible amount of lead time and work before a currency can be launched. So time banking, because it's really so simple to set up as a system, it's basically, you design a logo, you advertise, you get your system, your software up and running, you find some friends to help you, and boom, you can get it started. There's no lead time. So really, time banking is a really easy alternative currency to start. The other thing that I really find exciting about it is that it isn't taxable. So the IRS has ruled that volunteerism is not taxable and that time banking is a form of volunteerism. And so as long as the hour-for-hour exchange is maintained, and our time bank and Transition Town takes that stricture very seriously, as long as that is maintained, it is not taxable. And it also, the currency is not pegged to the US dollar. So if the US dollar inflates or deflates on the market, time dollars are still worth the same hour for hour. It doesn't inflate or deflate. I also think that it's really important that it removes that impersonal transaction-based money, the impersonal nature of transaction and money. To me, that makes time banking more powerful than other alternative currencies, because even with like a media money or a local currency, you can still just buy something and not know the person who created the object for you, although it's less likely because that person would be in your community. But with time banking, there really isn't a way for that to happen. You always are going to get to know people. And it really builds community around these acts of service and projects and co-creating together instead of consuming. So when you get together to do a resilience-based project or to do transition work or to help me stack firewood, you're really gathering around a community project rather than the idea of going out and bending, whether it be the U.S. dollar or another alternative currency. So I think that time banking in its the inherent value of it is that it really is a gifting. It is a way to bring gifting into the economy by an increment. Yes, there is a measure for measure. You know, in your account that you have plus or minus 1, 5, 10. You have an accounting system, so it's not true gifting, but it is a step backwards from the money economy into a gifting economy. All right, so this is the point where I'm going to talk about aligning transition and time banking together. And I wanted to know if there are any pressing questions at this time, if it's possible, Carolyn, to have people ask questions right now.
Sure. If you have, as Marie mentioned, a pressing question, press 1 on your keypad, and we'll also have other opportunities for Q&A. So press 1 on your keypad. And there is one from Libby Baker. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. The question I would have is, how does one know that the person giving has really the skills to do it? If you're fixing your house, for example, how do you know that they won't make errors and give you more problems? And I guess I'm still a little hung up on people coming into my home who you say there's a background check. I don't quite understand that, but it's the quality of the service. How do we know that people are skilled enough?
Right. Okay. So this opens up a sort of a whole area around like safety concerns and about quality. Okay. So you would have to vet them in the same way that you would vet a contractor. So if somebody was in a time bank offering light carpentry work and you wanted somebody to come in and fix your cabinets and you met them, yes, bringing somebody into your house might be an uncomfortable situation, and I would always suggest that if you don't know that person or you don't know somebody who knows them well, that you would have somebody with you, like you would any contractor. Like I wouldn't invite a new contractor into my house if I didn't have a friend or my husband here. And you would have to vet them. You would have to ask for letters of recommendation and talk to them about what they know how to do and not do. And the time bank can't make a guarantee about how well somebody's going to do a job. And, a lot of the services that are provided are non-skilled labor. But some of them are skilled, and you would just vet them in the same way that you would vet a contractor. In the 4 years I've been working in our time bank, I've never had one complaint from somebody not doing a good enough job. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen. I'm sure that it does happen. Some time banks choose to do background checks for all of their applicants. That does cost a little bit of money for each applicant. We choose not to do background checks. Our community the people tend to be known either to the facilitators or to each other. But we do ask everybody that if somebody's going to be babysitting your children, you do a background check, and that you be as cautious as you would be hiring somebody in the outside world, and always have somebody with you if they're unknown to you. So that would be my answer to that question. Any other questions?
There's a few more questions, Marie. Did you want to take, how many would you like to take right now?
Maybe one more, as long as they are very specific to how a time bank runs.
Okay.
So, and then the connection between the two, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more between transition and time banking, and then we can Q&A after that as well. But just maybe one or two more specific to how a time bank runs.
Okay. So Daniel Peterson, go ahead.
All right. Now, although I'm in the Fed type, I do see the advantages of economy of size. You said it's most efficient in a neighborhood, but have you any creative ideas how to move toward the large scale? So if I have something to offer to somebody in China, they'll be able to offer something to me?
Yes. There are broad time banks. Time Republic is the one that comes to mind and that I'm most familiar with, that are worldwide large-scale time banks. and you can check them out. So Time Republic is pretty well known. There are people creating these systems. I swear, it's almost daily. I get an email about a new system that's coming online that is labor-based or hour-for-hour based. It's an incredibly creative time to be involved in this new economy, because we have an incredible amount of technology, a lot of people who are very into the technology, and a worldwide sort of movement towards a new economy. So there's a lot of investigating you can do and a lot of places where you can look online. But I would start with Time Republic, but there are others out there.
So let's take one more for now, and then again Q&A again in a little bit. So Sharon Pontier.
Hi, thank you. I'm not sure if this relates to, Marie, exactly your question, so if you want to add it later, that's fine. But teaching or working with students in middle school, I would be interested to see how one could either incorporate it into a larger time bank or run a mini time bank in that classroom.
Yeah, I'm sure that you could actually set up if it's in a small within a small population, you could set up a checks and balances system just through pieces of paper as a time bank instead of using a software system, unless you wanted to get them used to using computers. But I mean, the way time banking worked before computers, and it did work long before, was through basically double entry accounting. And it's a way to just sort of, checks and balances going through, like I got this hour for doing this work, and I, used this hour for this work, and you just go back and forth between the two, and it can help teach them math skills. I don't have any experience doing it in a school, but I'm sure it would be very simple to set up.
Great. Thank you, Marie. So we'll get back into the presentation and do some more Q&A in a bit.
All right. Okay, so Transition Time Media did not start out with a time bank. It existed as a very small initiative at the beginning, and was really sort of searching for projects. Like that we had done lots of awareness raising, a lot of films, a lot of talks, a lot of book groups, and it remained small, and and we were struggling with visibility, feeling pretty invisible in our town. So our town, just to set it up, is roughly the size of Totnes. Actually, it's 5,500 people within the borough, and it's surrounded by other areas that call media home of about 15,000. There are other provinces around. Swarthmore College and Swarthmore is within that sort of larger community, so some people are familiar with that. So time banking came about. I had my second child was a baby in arms when I was sitting on the computer, like so many of us do, bored, looking for something online to pique my interest, and I was doing Stumbled Upon. And I don't know if anybody's familiar with that program, but I was stumbling on websites and reading and exploring the internet, and it stumbled upon the idea of time banking. And we had been doing basically informal time banking in our community anyway, and I looked at it and instantly sort of a light bulb went off. This was in 2005. And a light bulb went off, and I said, somebody really should start a time bank in our community. And then that was that. And I just moved on and didn't forget about it, but it just kind of percolated in my brain. And then as my children got older, I began to really seriously think about starting a time bank. And I did more reading and talked to people who were running time banks. I was lucky enough to have mentorship from a time bank that is about half an hour away from us in Phoenixville. And I began to think this might be something that I could do in our community. And I approached mutual friends in the transition, the group that got transition started. And I said, hey, is this something that transition might be interested in? And we put our heads together, and we decided that not only was it something that transition would be interested in doing as a project, that we really wanted to integrate it into transition completely into transition, not as just a project, but in every project that there would be time banking, that time banking would be at the core of our transition group, and it wouldn't just be a project, it would be a tool that we use in everything we do. So basically, what we did is that our time bank, when it started, aligned our goals completely. So Transition Town Media and Time Bank Media have the same goals, which is local resilience, reskilling, the local economy, local food, local energy. And we stated our mission as being in 100% alignment as a time bank with transition. We aligned our governance so that Time Bank's governance and the transition governance are one and the same. So the Time Bank is not a separate entity, but is part of the overall governance within transition. We aligned all of our projects and all of our gatherings as mutually led. So all of the Transition Town projects utilize the Time Bank in them in some way. So if we have an event, the volunteers are paid time dollars. If we do reskilling, we pay both the person teaching the reskilling class and the attendees time dollars, because the more our community is reskilled, the more resilient it is. Everything we do, there is a time banking component to it, and we structure our events in such a way to make use of that. And we also aligned our finances. We have the same 501c3. Transition Town Media is not the fiscal agent for the Time Bank. The Time Bank and Transition Town are one and the same 501c3. We're not just a fiscal agent. So that kind of deep, deep alignment allowed for us to move forward, again, thinking of transition and Time Bank as not enmeshed. It's completely one and the same, and not two separate entities with two separate goals, having two separate agendas. And I think that that's really, really important. So there are a lot of transition towns out there that say, oh, we have a transition town, there's a time bank in our community, but the time bank doesn't want to play. They don't want to do transition work. And that is a real problem. And it happens over and over and over again. I have seen that happen. And the only thing I could say is that either you need to really court them and help them see that they can have a sustainability component to what they do, or you can start another time bank that is very specific to your transition town. The world is big enough for more than one time bank in an area. But I really find that the total connection between the two movements is what gives both the power. So the first thing that there's a connection between the two where you get basically a feedback loop where the time bank is really helping the transition town thrive as a community endeavor, and the transition town is really helping the time bank thrive as a community endeavor, and it's a feedback loop. And what we've seen is that since the Time Bank opened, that our membership has exploded out the roof, that people are contributing to transition efforts who would have never participated in transition work before, didn't even know about some of the things that we're concerned about before their work, and now are sitting on our steering committee and doing this work. And transition people who were not well-versed in new economy work all of a sudden see the importance of, say, things like social justice, or doing how local economies can really support a transition town. And so there is this feedback loop that's built into, philosophically, into the combination between the two. One of the most fruitful things that I have found between the Time Bank and the transition is that it makes the application process and the granting of nonprofit status much easier than if one were doing it alone, if it was just a time bank or just a transition town. So I'm going to ask the people who are doing transition work and doing time bank work who are in the audience, how many of you are thinking about becoming a 501c3 but are not yet? That would be the first one. You're not yet. right? Not yet a 501c3, but thinking about it. The second option would be that you're already a 501c3. And the third would be that you're not thinking about it at all.
And Marie, that is just for those people that are involved in transition towns already?
And Timebank too.
Okay, so for those of
sometimes,
you...
Yeah. Some Timebanks aren't 501c3s.
Okay. So for those of you who are, you'll press 1. Those of you who are not, you'll press 2. And then 3 was for... The first one was that you're considering it but are not yet one. Okay, sorry.
No, it's all right. The first one is you're considering it but you are not yet a 501c3. The second one was you are a 501c3 already. And the third one is that you're not a 501c3 and you're not interested in being one.
So this is just a subset of people, the bulk of which haven't responded to your question on any level, Marie, so it didn't directly apply perhaps. So we have 24 hands up, and that's about a quarter of the people on the call. So of those with their hands up, 15% answered 1, and 12% 2, and 6% 3.
Okay. So I'll just say a little bit then about the 501c3. So we applied for a 501c3 as a transition town and a time bank together. We decided that that was a really good way for us to go, not because we were eager to apply for large grants and become grant dependent as an organization, but because we wanted to keep our funding options open, and we wanted members, people who were giving donations to us on a yearly basis, to get deductions if they so chose to get them. So we applied for a 501c3 with this idea that our transition town and our time bank were enmeshed, and we were granted the 501c3 in 6 months with no clarifying documentation. The IRS was completely satisfied with our explanation about what we were doing and why we were doing it and why it qualified for nonprofit status. And the reason for that is because a 501c3 hinges on a few different qualifications, and one of them is public education or public service. So usually a transition town will say that it is a public education, that it offers public education, and that's why it should be granted 501c3. And usually a time bank will say it's a public service, and that is why it should be a 501c3. But because a transition town and a time bank together are both, it makes the process much easier. So when you have the two merged together, the organization is both a public education and a public service. So in the presentation, the PDF presentation that Carolyn sent out at the beginning, I have the tax-exempt code, what the purpose is that they will grant tax exemption for in the United States. And I have highlighted some of the wording that makes it makes a transition town and a time bank, the joined entity, more likely to get 501c3 status. So I won't read that to you, but you should maybe go into the PDF and have a look if this is your interest. Okay, so one of the really great things about being an enmeshed time bank and transition town is an easier 501c3 application process. The second thing is that transition towns are always struggling with money. That a lot of what they do doesn't bring in any cash, but a lot of what they do requires that some funding be present. So websites, printing flyers and brochures, paying for speakers. And transition towns are always trying to come up with really creative ways to just have a small income stream. And our transition town was really struggling with that as well, and it was being privately funded by a couple of individuals before the time bank started. And because we chose with our time bank to ask for a $35 membership fee every year, which could be waived if you had any qualms about paying that or could not pay that for some reason, we gave ourselves a small income stream through the operating of the time bank. And it allowed the transition town to expand its outreach tremendously, just having that very small income stream. We were able to take the website and make it so that a private person wasn't paying for that, and the hosting. We were able to print brochures not just about our transition town but about other topics and flyers. We were able to throw big events. We do a happiness week every year, and we can fund those events without having to tap into private funds and people personally donating. So we have a small income stream. And this is a really important part of it, is that our transition town is really dedicated to starting projects that not, they don't have to be, but that they can provide a small, stable income for our transition town. We don't want to become grant dependent. We don't want to have to apply for big grants and then have infrastructure we have to pay for. So what we're doing is starting these projects that create a small income for us that then allow us to expand our outreach. One of those projects, other than the Time Bank that we started, is a little thing called the Media Free Store. And we started that this summer. And even though everything inside of it is free, it is staffed by a volunteer who are paid time dollars. We have 80 or 90, I don't know the exact count right now, volunteers who run the store and who sit shifts. All of the merchandise is donated, and because we're a 501c3, it can be tax deductible, donated to the store, and anybody can come in and take what they need from the store. And people want to make donations. We have a jar up front, and people want to make donations to support the store, and we are able to pay our rent and provide a small income on top of the rent to run the store, and we've hired a part-time 5-hour-a-week administrator for our transition town through those funds. So again, the time banking is interwoven into the project through volunteerism, and we are able to make a small income to help expand our outreach. And right now, the administrator that we're hiring with that money is doing a content management system for our transition town so that we can track people's participation a little bit better and really streamline our outreach. The third thing that really has grown and flourished since the Time Bank and the Transition Town joined forces is that Transition's membership has gone through the roof. It was less than 100 people when I joined, and it is now roughly around 1,000 people. And this is in a community of 5,500 people, so that's a fairly large percentage. So the Time Bank has really helped with that, because the Time Banks, the community projects have drawn in people working through the Time Bank. So people who have not ever heard of Transition Town before will participate in Time Bank projects and then hear about transition and then join transition. And the transition thinking and the interest in these projects are stimulated by volunteer efforts in the community. So people begin to see the value in building community resilience, and they begin to see the value of co-creating and co-working. And again, they want to join and then participate in transition more. We also are really blessed that the community partners who would really have usually probably never had anything to do with transition, say Hedgerow Theater, who sells its tickets in the Time Bank for $2 time dollars, that they become then active participants and with an active relationship to transition as well. So it brings in sort of new energy and new ideas about how transition looks at a community through, say, the point of view of the lens of art, the arts, for instance. And I like to really think about that the people working through the Time Bank who are really doing transition work and they don't really know it, that it's sort of subversive, that we're engaging a lot of people in the community to do resilience work when they really wouldn't have ever stated a desire to necessarily to participate in transition, but they're still doing that work. And they're doing the work of getting to know their neighbors and helping teach people to knit, or helping people with computer problems, or delivering food. And all of that is building community resilience, which is transition's aim, but isn't necessarily under the umbrella of transition necessarily. And I find that to be really, it buoys my spirits to see people doing that and participating in the Time Bank. And then I say, oh, but this is something that transition's doing. And they're like, well, what is transition? And it makes me happy. I feel like, well, we have some messaging that we need to do, but it makes me really happy to know that this work is going on. And it's not necessarily because they want to participate in transition work, that they're doing it because they're active in the Time Bank and they want to get to know their neighbors. And whatever the reason that they're participating in the work is still getting done. I talked a little bit about social justice. So the last thing that I wanted to add to this is that social justice and transition towns. So there is a pretty significant diversity problem in many transition towns across the United States. I can't really speak for transition in Europe or other parts of the world, but I know that in the United States that transition towns really struggle with that, and how to make the work of transition attractive to people in other areas of our community. And like I said, Pamela Boyce-Sims has been doing an incredible amount of work on this. Transition towns are struggling with it, and so that's why these webinars and these topics are coming up. But the great thing about time banking is that it's rooted in the idea of social justice. So Edgar Kahn, when he created modern time banking in the 1980s, did it from a lens of social justice. He was very interested in people who were legally undervalued, people who were deprived, who had very few economic resources, who were leaving prisons, and their horizons were very limited, and they were really constricted in what they could and couldn't do. And he created this system to sort of really go in and address some of these inequities in the way that our economic system and our culture. And so because time banking's roots is in social justice and not in environmentalism or resilience or sustainability, it brings a tool that transition towns can use to address some of these concerns, the social justice concerns, in our transition initiatives. Right? There's no real resilience in a community without engaging in these problems. We can't not engage in these problems. So bringing in diversity and different opinions and different gifts is really what is going to make our communities more resilient in the future. And I think time banking really helps transition towns address these problems. All right, so I'm going to give you a quick overview about how to start a time bank, very, very quick. There's a lot more information in that flyer that I sent out, the PDF, and I am available if you want to write me. I can give you more resources, and I can talk to you about starting time banks if you have questions. I do for free. I will mentor nonprofits who are trying to start a time bank, because I want to. So that was done for me, and I want to do it for other people. So I'm a resource, and you can feel free to email me if you want to. So the way that I started a time bank is I gathered a group of people, about 8 to 10 I think is the sweet spot, of people who have really great skills. So people who are good at marketing, people who are good at computers, people who, maybe a designer. I was lucky in that because my husband is a designer and he designed our logo. A printer, somebody who can throw really great events. So writers, people who can do blogs, social media. So people who have these sorts of skills. So gather a group of people that you can work with and who are interested in this as a project. And like I said, 8 to 10 I think is a good number. Spend some time defining your mission, the time frame that you want to have to launch, and set a launch date. And any other goals, so how many members you want to have when you first launch or anything like that. So set this all down and talk about governance and how you're going to, manage the time bank through governance. And then when you have your goals and due dates set down, a project planning calendar, and get your website and your logo and your printed material up, get a bank account, and plan a launch party. So we found that a launch party with live music and food and all of this good stuff really brought in, we've had 150 or 175 people come to our launch party, and 65 of them joined. So right from the beginning, we had a really good, solid start number of people. I think 50 is sort of the baseline of diversity that you need to really make a time bank thrive at minimum. That's the minimum. And so I kind of feel like you need like a one big bang to get it started. So plan a launch party and one date where you're going to start your time bank. And then in the interim, find a few community partners, so businesses or nonprofits, to really participate and join your time bank when it's up and running. And then continue to talk about it during the period leading up to launch, and then after launch, be an advocate for your time bank and really, try and get people to join and understand it and connect with people. So that's how to, on a basic level, get it started. There's more information in that PDF. So we can move to questions now. We have about 10 minutes for questions, so I think that's a good amount of time.
Yeah, so press 1 on your keypad, and in the interest of time, try to be concise, and we'll get in a number more questions that way. Let's start with Pete Shoemaker. Go ahead.
Hello. I'm very interested in this, and I'd like to try to demo the software and get 8 or 10 of my friends in different houses to just try it and play with it to get an idea of it. Which of the software links that you gave would be the best one to try that?
Well, I don't know. It's really hard to say the best for demoing. I really don't know. We use Community Weaver. Our World is a perfectly fine software, and there are a number out there. Community Weaver is just about to go through an upgrade. We're actually beta testing it in our time bank right now, and so it's going to change within the next month or two, and it's really user friendly. The beta testing is I can tell it's very user friendly. You can write them and ask if you can play around with that, or you can talk to Our World. It just really, you can just look at the systems and ask them, write to them and ask them. Okay,
and are they typically paid systems, or are they free? Some of them are both. Either one.
Some are one, some are the other. So like Our World is a system where you get the software for free, but the training they ask you to pay for, and Community Weaver is paid by the number of people who are in your time bank, so it's prorated, and the software training is done by peers, but usually for free. So it really, and then there are a whole lot of other softwares out there, softwares that work on European systems. There are other softwares out there. But so it really varies from one to the other. And there are trade-offs with each, and there are benefits to each.
So you're actually using a software that requires you to pay some cash to the software provider?
Right. And yeah, I am. We're using that one.
And how is that handled in your timing? Where does that cash come from?
Well, we charge $35 for a membership fee for people who can and want to pay for it, and it's part of the expenses that transition pays for.
Okay.
So, and then every year we have training. So for new members or people who want to use to learn time banking, we have people come up and do trainings and stuff.
Let's move on. Margaret
Yep.
De La Cruz.
Yes. Hi. Thank you. I was going to start a gift circle in my community here as a way to start getting the community involved and eventually starting a transition town. So my question is, well, now that I'm listening more to time banking, I'm thinking, well, I'll introduce that idea too in the gift circle. But what about starting a transition town from a time bank thing? Can you talk about that? starting the time bank first and then evolving it into a transition town?
I think that is a perfectly wonderful path. I do, and I think that's the way that you can, really make it so that the time bank and the transition town are aligned in their goals. I do gift circles as well. We hold gift circles in our community twice a year, and I find them to be fantastic ways to get people to understand gift economics and to get people face-to-face in a space where they are actually exchanging not only services for each other but also goods. So that's why gift circles are great, is that you can bring a book and give it to somebody, or bring a piece of furniture you don't want, that table that has been sitting in your corner that you don't want. And it's a way to augment time banking. So I really am happy to hear that you're doing a gift circle. But I think it's a really good way to get the currency up and running and get people interested in resilience. A time bank would be a really great way into a transition model. So okay. I would recommend it.
Thank you.
Terry Sullivan, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. We have a time bank here in Vashon Island in Washington, and we started about a year ago. And what we, through a series of orientation meetings, we picked up about 50 very enthusiastic members. They were people that were very enthusiastic about the idea, and they paid their membership fee and joined, but I'd say maybe half of them never even activated their account, and the rest are very reticent. They're very it's getting to use the time bank itself is more of kind of a habit change, changing your viewpoint, your way of seeing and doing things. And we seem to have a hard time getting people to make that transition in their heads and starting to make it a useful part of the community rather than just a good idea.
Right. And this is a very common thing that people talk about. So you can look at it from two angles. So there's a way to sort of help encourage people to log into their system more often. I find that weekly emails with reminders to log in and incentives to log in say, for logging in and placing an offer or request, we will give you a time dollar. Or having it be mandatory that anybody who joins the time bank has to have an offer and a request active. Things like that help build the diversity up, but it's a constant reminding of people to check the time bank. And this is where the social media comes in, and emails and doing newsletters, and it just is a constant messaging battle. So what you're experiencing as a time bank is pretty common. I would, because it's such a small time bank, and because there's some subset that are reticent to participate and some who haven't even activated their accounts, I would say you need to do a little bit of this like pushing and marketing to get them really more invested in the time bank, including like having meetings, calling people on the phone one by one, having dinners, like informal dinners of 10 people where you get people together so that they know each other and are more willing to make the exchange, where you talk about why it's important that they exchange and actually record their exchange. And so it sometimes can be a real battle about messaging. The other part of it is that there's a point in time, so we have 250 people in our time bank, and there's a certain percentage who aren't active. And I've kind of let that go in a way, because some of the people in the time bank, when I call them up and I say, hey, I see you haven't been on the time bank software for a couple of years, they say to me, Marie, your idea, I just am so busy right now. The idea is wonderful and I want to support it, and I just want to give you the $35 for now and let that be okay, and I'll engage later when I have more time. And so I've broadened my idea about what support is. And they want to support me, they just can't right that second participate, and I kind of let that be okay. So it kind of takes, there's two parts of it. Like, you want to encourage people who need it and who should be actively engaged to really do that, but then also people who want to support you but just aren't going to right now, just kind of let that go. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I've actually thought of most of those things, but you're giving me some confidence that I've more or less, got a good idea of what needs to be done.
Yeah,
So,
it's really a lot of like people just like being relentless in the connecting people department. And that's why when having good connectors in your time bank, people who are really willing to do this work, is critical.
I think we might have time for one more quick question, and I wanted to check. Susan Anderson, did you have your hand up? You might have pushed your keypad because it shows up as number 4. So let's end with a quick question from you, Libby Baker.
Yes, I'm really struggling with this because it seems so great, but it seems to me that it's all based on volunteer management, administration, leadership from people who don't need to earn an income, because without that, I don't see how it can work. How, like for example, every time bank needs a U. So how do you find people who are willing to contribute all this time as a volunteer?
Well, it isn't just in me. Like I have a committee of 8 to 10 people who do a good amount of work, and they have very specific things that they're good at. I tend to be the one talking about it more, but I'm not the one doing all the work. It is very true that time banks work best where there is profound need. So where people actually need the time bank, they need each other to get their needs met, to put food on the table, where they really need that community interaction. Actually, time banks thrive much more. When it's kind of like this cool alternative currency experiment, people do it and they have fun doing it. But where there is need, right, that's where it really works. But the reality is that every community has needs. So my community is not really affluent, but it's not really struggling either economically. But there are people in our time bank who have had times in their life where they've really struggled. And we have an artist who moved to media, had very little money, and she did over 200 transactions in the first 18 months of her relationship with the time bank, and got almost all of her needs met, including food and a lot of other things. People were gifting her shares of their CSA shares and things like this. Like she didn't pay them time dollars for the food, but she paid time dollars for their work in the fields that they did, and they gave her food. And so she got a lot of her needs met. And you can be very, very creative and get a lot of needs met through time banking. You won't get all of them met, but a lot of them you will.
Wow, Marie, thank you so much for everything. I just wanted to give you a chance for a closing comment if you have one, and then we'll end for today.
All right. Well, I just wanted to thank you all for taking the time. I know it's a busy time during the day to meet up here to do this, and these problems are very, very important. Our economic system, resilience in our communities, and the work we're doing is really, really important. And I just wanted to say thank you for being out there, even though I can't see you or hear you unless you're asking questions. I know you're out there, and this sort of invisible tribe of people doing this work is what keeps me committed to the work. And I just wanted to say thank you.
And I want to deeply thank you, Marie, for being such a groundbreaker, and also the work you've done sort of to merge transition with time banking is quite extraordinary, and I think we can all learn some good lessons from that deep collaboration. So thank you so much, and